my entire childhood. My father and I used to take late-night walks due to his insomnia from shift work. Our neighborhood is considered very safe, and ultimately was an urban neighborhood, besides one of the roads towards the back of the neighborhood being lined with thick forest for about a mile and about a quarter deep, which made a circle back in itself. All of these walks are very dear memories of mine except one, and it ended being the last one. Along the road with the tree line, there was a single streetlight to illuminate a small plot of land that someone owned, but that was very overgrown and poorly kept. It was very common for us to walk this road to enjoy the sounds of the forest, the lack of illumination, and the ease of circling back. One ordinary night, as we were walking and making conversation, my father abruptly stopped, pulled me close, put a hand over my mouth, crouched with me, and pointed towards the single illuminated plot roughly 100 yards away. At first, I didn't see anything and thought he was pulling my leg, but just as I began to protest his grasp, I saw a very small humanoid figure, roughly 3 feet in height, scrawny, with long limbs, materialize out of the plot's brush line and cautiously take in its surroundings, before signaling towards the brush. After a few seconds, 2 other small, humanoid figures materialize as well. After a brief moment of what looked to be a discussion, all 3 made a dash for the forest tree line. Once this happened, my father picked me up, threw me over his shoulder, and made a break for our home, which was roughly a half-mile away. Mind you, my father is 6 feet 5 inches, 220 pounds, and I was roughly 120 pounds at this time, and he never showed signs of slowing due to his fear and adrenaline. After this night, we never took late-night walks. He installed 4 bright motion detection lights around our acre plot, and he brought home a dog. The few times I've tried bringing it up, he doesn't want to discuss it, and I made it clear he never wanted to. Those figures still give me chills, and the image of the 3 huddled together is very vivid 15 years later.
There was a really weird occurrence at my dad's house a few years ago. He awoke to the sound of dogs barking, and realized the neighborhood dogs were barking at something that was moving parallel to the road. When his own started to bark, he went outside to see what was up. Across the street is pretty much all forest except for a church directly across the street, which at the time was just a gravel lot. My dad was too far away to see anything, but in the dead of night, he could definitely hear the sound of someone running at full tilt across the gravel. A few things freaked him out about this. Whenever it was definitely running on 2 feet, try having a dog run on gravel against a human, and you can tell the difference. And it was big. Both myself and he have witnessed large animals like bears and moose running through the underbrush, and according to him, it sounded like it was of a similar size to those creatures. 2, it was easily running somewhere around 40-50 miles per hour in the clearing of the lot, then slowed down again as it went back into the woods. He was able to compare the speed, because the road itself has a 45 mph limit, so it was going just as fast as a passing car. 3, the final thing. Its huffing and gasping was so loud he could hear it from his front door and was obviously not human. We looked online later to compare its sound to other animals, and it really didn't sound like anything he'd ever heard before. The freakiest part was the almost synchronous reactions the dogs had. He's never heard dogs react like that before. Both him, my stepmom, my stepbrother, and several of our neighbors can account for hearing the strange barking from the dogs, but it was only my dad who heard what they were after. Nothing has happened like that since, and I've never personally witnessed anything like it. We are right on the border of the Cascade Mountain Range and are surrounded by park and federal land, if you want to get an idea of where this took place.
I'll try to make this as short as possible. I was at camp with my parents at our place. My grandparents had their camp about 300 yards down the trail. Long story short, it's about 3 a.m., and we are at my grandparents' place. Everyone is pretty drunk except me because, at the time, I was only 14. It was getting really late, so we finally decided to walk back to our camp to call it a night. As we are walking back, I hear some tussling in the woods, and I brush it off as just deer or whatever. The noises drew closer and felt more awkward. It didn't feel like something was walking more. Following, I look into the woods to see a figure with a rather pointed face. It was tall and had reddish eyes. It was about 50 or so yards out from where we were. I told my dad we had to run because this thing looked scary as fuck. He didn't understand, so we went back to camp, locked the doors, and I tried explaining to him. To this day, he doesn't remember this ever happening. Cut to 4 years later, at my best friend's house, and we are all telling ghost stories. I decided to tell that story, and my friends kind of shrugged it off as bullshit. One of my friends, whom I'll call W, seemed more interested in it. W kept asking me about the occurrence, and eventually he pulled up a picture of what the flat wood monster was. The room went silent when I realized that was exactly what I had encountered. The scariest part about this whole thing is the fact that I had no clue what this was until my friend showed me an image of the Flatwoods monster. The only thing is that the Flatwoods monster has been proven false. So then what did we really see?
I was on a ferry for a school softball trip off Kodiak Island, Alaska, in 2014. I was 18. A whole bunch of us had snuck up to the deck around 11 p.m. to watch the waves, smoke cigarettes and weed, and generally be teenagers on a boat without supervision. It was 11 p.m. in May in Alaska, so the sun was thinking about setting, but it was still very bright outside. So we're just doing our thing, and we notice a pod of orcas swimming with the ferry's wake, which is very cool but not, like, unusual. If you're familiar with the dimensions of an orca fin, you know they're about 4 to 6 feet in height and look like big black spikes coming out of the water. They travel and hunt in pods of anywhere between 15 and 40 whales, apex predators. The beautiful demon murderers of the sea, total assholes, top of the food chain. So we saw a pod of orcas. We counted them to be around 10 to 15, with some babies scattered in there. It was very fun to watch. It took them a good 30 minutes to all go by. We tried to get pictures, but it was just dark enough that our shitty phone cameras weren't very good. Another 30 or 40 minutes go by, and we've all pretty much sobbed up. It's about to get dark, and we're cold and sleepy and about ready to go in. No more orcas. I haven't seen one for like half an hour, and then one of my JV girls spots another one. So we all turn and look, but one dorsal fin is immediately followed by another, and another, and another, and then two more, and then two more after that, in two separate rows, and they're taller, by a lot, and jagged. Like some have whole chunks torn out of them. And they're all 8 to 10 feet high. And they're all attached to one creature. And we can just barely see its back slicing through the water, covered in these rows of spikes, and it just keeps coming. This thing is like 20 or 30 feet from the ferry, running parallel to it, and we are all transfixed. There's like 9 or 10 of us, and no one is saying a word because we've all turned to look at a whale. And we are all now watching something that is horrifically, terrifyingly, obviously, not a whale. Someone tries to take a picture, but it's too dark at this point. And the only reason we can see this thing is the light cast from ferry portholes. Take as long as it takes when it comes to things that you really wish you had a picture of. But we all stand there completely scared, fucking stiff, and in awe, and we watch this thing just keep surfacing for a good 6 or 7 minutes. Which means that whatever it was long. Like 60 or 70 feet long, or longer, and covered in enormous spikes. Spikes that look like they'd won thousands of battles with God knows what. It took what felt like an eternity for any of us to say anything after the last of it disappeared back into the strait. If you and like 8 of your friends had just all seen something that all science had definitely pointed to not existing, and you had all seen the same exact thing, and it was very obviously trailing, nay, hunting, not 1 but 15-something apex fucking predators. What do you even say to break that silence? That's the thing that eats me up about the whole thing. It was hunting. It was following them. It was literally hunting about 60 tons of toothy, angry, intelligent apex predators. Every once in a while, one of us will hit another one up and check in, like, do you remember this? Was I hallucinating? Did we all see the same insane, worldview melting, terrifying thing that night? And the reason I know we did is because none of us talked about it after that. Not during the trip, not after, not to any of our friends. Because how the fuck do you even tell someone about something like that? Now we have almost 10 years between us. And that night, I assume some of them probably told people. I know I tell people because I've seen a lot of shit like that in Alaska, and I'm that bitch. And also because there's a very rich history among Native Alaskans of something that lives and hunts in the waters around Kodiak. And it's important to tell its story because someday it's going to eat a little too much plastic, and no one will ever watch it hunt a pod of orcas from a boat ever again.
One time, me and my friend were in our car late at night after a Whataburger run. It was about 3 a.m., and we were chilling, eating in the car, and joking around. Don't ask why we were up so late. It was my sophomore year of college, and we were pulling an all-nighter for, Lord knows, why. But anyway, we pull into her apartment complex and park perpendicular to the forest surrounding the majority of her complex. As soon as I put my car in park, I felt everything go cold, and I promise you, I felt something in the air. I keep seeing this thing move in the forest out of the corner of my eye, but I think it's just the wind and branches. Finally, I'm like, what the fuck is that thing? And so I look closer, and it's two huge yellow eyes staring out directly into my eyes. How is it that when I finally look harder, we make direct eye contact? This thing has been staring into my eyes for a long time. I just know it. So I'm like, oh, crap. There's a man in the forest to my friend, and we both think it's a police officer at first. I don't know why we thought that, but once it showed itself, we knew it was no police officer. But then, as soon as I made eye contact with it, this thing started walking out very quickly, coming straight for my car. Keep in mind that my car was on and my lights were on, so this thing knew that I would see it coming. It steps out, and its arms and legs are way too long. It looked like a creature trying to be human, but it wasn't quite pulling it off. The proportions and speed of the movements were all just too wrong and off. I fully believe this wasn't a human with its huge and hollow yellow eyes. It never broke eye contact with me. I drove a small Volkswagen Bug at the time, which I know is a small car, but this creature was towering above my car. It was literally the boogeyman. The closer I looked at him, the more scary it got. The more scared I got, the bigger it grew. Its face was covered by what looked like, and I'm not kidding, a mask of a human face, but the thing's eyes were definitely its own. Finally, I snapped out of my terror and reversed out of my spot so fast. By that time, he had made it all the way to the front of my car and was touching the hood. I wish I had run it over, honestly. But when I looked back in my rearview mirror to see what was going on, it was standing in the spot I had just been parked in, waving, and staring straight into my eyes through the mirror. I don't know what this was. I've heard lots of things. I think it was a demon for sure. But that's just me.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more scary stories.